will get a copy of this recording that you can pause and rewind going forward at your convenience. So welcome to Elevate One. As you heard, my name is Lloyd Wafer, and I am your professional learning specialist here at IXL. If you don't already have my contact information, please make note of it and please make use of it, because I'm going to be a resource for you now going forward as you take the strategies we explore here today and begin to implement them in your practice. It's pretty natural that you're going to have more questions down the road, so please don't hesitate to reach out as those questions do arise. I'll just say about myself that I did my classroom teaching in Chicago, and I did use IXL actively as an active part of my practice during my instructional years, including forming IEP goals and working with my diverse learners. I'm going to share my contact information again at the end of the presentation, as well as contact for our tech support team, in case you're experiencing more of a technical issue, if something's not working or functioning. That's going to be tech support, but any questions about teaching or using the platform, those are going to be through me. IXL is personalized learning, and we know that personalized learning is really complex, but IXL makes it simple for teachers to implement effectively in your practice. IXL is built on these 4 key components that you see on screen, and these components are fully integrated. So they're designed to work together to seamlessly give teachers everything they need to differentiate instruction and help your students grow. For teachers, IXL gives you direct access to that comprehensive pre-K through 12 curriculum with that personalized targeted guidance so it can reach each student at their actual working level and help them grow from where they actually are, regardless of their rostered grade. For our students, IXL drives engagement in an authentic way, really encouraging students to own their own learning, embrace new challenges, and build skills and confidence that will last. Now, since you've actively been using IXL, my main goal today is to show you how to take your usage of IXL to the next level. We have done extensive research, including numerous statewide studies that really show how IXL schools outperform all others. And the longer they use IXL, the better they actually do. So we're going to show you some of the proven strategies so that you can see some of these results with your own students. We're going to begin by taking a look at the real-time diagnostic, and I'll show you how you can use this tool to really personalize learning for your diverse students. Then we're going to take a look at the IXL curriculum and how it supports any learning needs that your students might have at any time. We're going to explore some strategies for planning your lesson, delivering your lesson, and monitoring student progress. To finish off our time, we're going to take a look at some of the extra tools that can empower students with strategies for engaging with IXL usage. I definitely do want to encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. I'm just going to take a moment to mute the microphones of everybody in attendance just to help with the background noise for the recording. But when I do hit those planned question breaks, I'm going to pause. I'll let you know we're at a question break, and you can feel free to unmute your microphone and ask any questions that you might have. Another great option to help us save time is to actually type out your question into the Zoom chat box. If you type your question into the chat box, I will also monitor and check that chat box when I hit those question breaks, and I can address questions before moving on to the next section. All right, I want to begin by diving into the real-time diagnostic. You've probably seen firsthand how IXL as a platform is a really powerful tool for supporting your daily instruction and all of those individual learning goals. But the truth is, IXL can do a lot more than just that. It can truly help you personalize learning for every student. As you know, that first step for personalized learning is you have to know where your students are at right now. How can I find out what my students know and what they don't know? That's the real-time diagnostic. It assesses students across every concept in that pre-K through 12 curriculum, and then it pinpoints each student's actual grade level proficiency within math and language arts. Before we dive into the diagnostic, I want to set the stage a bit because this is not like traditional diagnostics that you've probably used before, so much more than that. So here are a couple important things to know. First, the diagnostic is designed to give you the insight that you need immediately. So it makes it possible to have accurate, up-to-date stats that you can really use every day. The diagnostic also works quickly, and this is not going to take up a lot of your time. We're able to pinpoint students' knowledge levels in as little as 45 minutes, and we can keep these levels up to date throughout the year with very little effort. just 2 additional hours spread out over the entire school year. In just a moment, we're going to talk implementation, recommendations, and suggestions, but this is all just to say that this is not going to be a big time commitment for you. And lastly, the diagnostic automatically provides a personalized action plan for each student. So both you and your students are going to get specific next steps that are based on their results. And we're even going to link both you and your students to the exact skills that they need on IXL, so they can start working on those right away. The diagnostic helps you to understand where your students are at right now and provides you insights that you need to support each student towards their targeted growth goals. So again, we want to think of this as more of an instructional diagnostic. Let's go ahead and take a look at the student experience in the diagnostic together by switching over to my example student account. When students sign in, they can access the diagnostic at any point by clicking on that green diagnostic tile. This is what they're going to see when they're brand new. I've just reset this data before we started, so we're looking at a blank slate here. Once they start practicing in the diagnostic week to week, they are going to fill out their data here. It won't be blurry. It'll show clearly what their scores are, and they can track their progress as they progress through the year. But since this is my first session, I'm going to go ahead to click to step into the arena. A couple of things I want to point out here. By default, it will diagnose your students in both math and language arts, and it does so in an integrated way. So asking a few questions in one subject, then switching to the other for a few, and back and forth. That makes for a really seamless experience. However, since you're teaching at a high school level, most likely most of you are departmentalized and you're focused in on a specific subject, either math, most likely, or possibly language arts. So please note that we absolutely can diagnose in one subject at a time. We just need to prompt the student at the beginning of their session to click into the top corner there, that drop down, and then select the specific subject that they wish to diagnose in for that session. If you do happen to teach both subjects, and if it works logistically, feel free to leave it in the default. But at the high school level, most classrooms will focus on a specific subject at a time. Once they've made that selection, they're up and running working. And it's often going to start the students off with a choice, and it's going to give them choice throughout their process. So every so often, they'll be interrupted and asked what type of question they want to work on next. And giving students choice is one of the ways that we help them stay dialed in and invested throughout the diagnostic process. So as I made my selection, as I begin answering questions, keep in mind, it is going to start the students at their rostered grade level. This student is rostered to 5th grade, so it's going to start, we're going to see a lot of 5th grade type content here, but it is adaptive. So it's going to start your students at that rostered grade. As soon as they start answering questions, it is going to respond to how they're doing, scaling up or down to find their actual grade level proficiencies and all of their gaps along the way. If I make a mistake while working, it will let me know, oh, there was a mistake, but I'll still see that same colorful animation, and then it just moves right on to the next question. I'm going to show that one more time. It acknowledges the mistake, but visually the experience will flow the same. We're going to move on to the next question, and we want to keep this as a positive experience. This is purely formative data. They're not going to learn or grow during their time in the diagnostic. This is just giving us a sense of what they know and what they might still need help with. So as they answer questions, it will continue to keep that momentum going, continue to refine and pinpoint their actual levels. If they come across content that they're not yet familiar with, and that is going to happen in the diagnostic, well, when they do see something, if they don't have a strategy for approaching it, they can always click this I don't know this yet button, which appears in the bottom right corner. That's going to make a point to return to it later, but they'll still see that colorful dancing animation, and then right on to the next question. Oh, it's starting to narrow down my levels. If it does, as it does begin to narrow their levels or update them, it will show it with a quick update, and then right on to the next question. So this allows us again to get a lot of diagnostic data quickly, regardless of how the student's actually doing as they answer questions. As I continue to answer questions, I will be able as a student to see my progress along the top here. So if I hover over the arena icon, I'll see this flag, and that will progress towards the right until ultimately reaching full completion. At any point, students can stop and check out their levels. You can see it's starting to fill out my math profile now that I've answered a few questions, and they can return to the arena at any point. Their progress will pick up exactly where they left off. So Again, their progress is recorded and saved automatically. Now, it typically, oh, you can see I'm progressing now. I've answered a few questions. I'm making my way towards getting my level pinpointed. Now, you can see this has scaled to quite primary work here because, as you saw while I was working, I've been struggling. I've missed a lot of questions intentionally. I've clicked I don't know this a lot. So it's already beginning to scale down lots of this content to a level that will be accessible to me. Again, it will scale up or down dynamically and find those actual grade level proficiencies. We do want the students to keep working in their diagnostic until those initial diagnostic levels are fully pinpointed. This will typically take, as I mentioned, about 45 minutes per subject. This is as little as 45 minutes, so keep in mind some students might take more. Now, this does not need to be done all at once. Since we are working with diverse learners, for some of our high school students, working for 45 minutes might be a great goal for them as part of helping them build their endurance. For other students, we know that this is not going to be aligned with their IEP goals. So definitely please make sure that you do divide this up or chunk it into manageable chunks that align with grade level or IEP expectations. So maybe we just work on this for 15 minutes a day and we just do it for a few days each day this week. Maybe we work on it for 10 minutes a day and just do a little bit, or even down to 5 minutes a day, and we just work on it consistently every day. It doesn't matter how many sessions.
Lloyd?
Yes.
I just don't know when, but there's a question on the chat. I'm not sure if you can see that, but can I read it for you?
Yes, I actually was planning, as I mentioned, I'm gonna chunk the questions up. So I can't see the chat at the same time while I'm presenting, but I will monitor that chat box. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through the section of content, and then I'll pause for questions, addressing any questions before moving on to the next section. I'm definitely going to monitor that chat box before moving on.
Sounds good.
There's definitely a chance some of the questions will be answered naturally over the course of the presentation, saving us time.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do want the students to work until they have completed that initial diagnostic. Again, however many sessions it takes. Once they have completed that initial diagnostic, they will see this popover appear, letting them know those levels are complete. They can then click to reveal their levels and go to their diagnostic action center. Now, as the students work in their diagnostic, we know that that data will quickly become outdated. And even the best diagnostic will become outdated because your students are going to learn and grow every week. You're teaching them new things every day. So in order to maintain this data week in and week out and make sure that it's something that you can actually use and that your students can use each day, we want to maintain this data by keeping it up to date in the following two ways. First, we want to have the students maintain their data by coming back to the diagnostic once a week for a brief 10-minute session to update their data. This check-in can be done informally. You can set aside time during the week. So I used to do mine on Wednesdays. My students just knew every Wednesday we would come in, we'll do our diagnostic check-in for 10 minutes, and then we'll transition to our activity for the day. You can schedule this and work it in any way that works for you. And if you miss a week here or there, no big deal. Just have them get on the next time. It's just the closer you can stick to this 10-minute update a week, the more rich and actionable your data is going to be. The second thing that we want to make sure students do to maintain their levels is simply work on their IXL skills. And we're going to take a look at IXL skills next. But whenever students are working on skills, be it skills from their recommendations wall or skills you're directly assigning to them, that progress is also automatically incorporated into their diagnostic levels. Again, everything is integrated. So that makes sure we do have a complete, meaningful profile for your learners. All right, we're going to go ahead and dive into the diagnostic data next. Before I do that, let me go ahead and pause here. I'm going to read the question in the chat first, and then we'll open it up to see if there are any other questions. Someone asked in the chat, some students are having accommodation to use the calculator when they're taking an assessment. Great question. Whatever accommodations the student has, we definitely want to mirror those same accommodations when they're working in the diagnostic. Some of the things in the diagnostic, especially at the high school level, will automatically pull up a digital or virtual calculator for them, especially if it is a calculator specific skill. But if we have not provided a virtual calculator and the student does have that accommodation, we definitely want to make sure we honor that. So basically, we're just mirroring the same way that they take assessments or standardized assessments or tests. We'll provide those same types of accommodations whenever our students are working. Great question. Again, that is compatible with the philosophy of the diagnostic. Again, it's aligned with the accommodation. So if the student does not have a calculator in that accommodation, then we want to make sure they only use the calculators that are virtually provided. If they do have that calculator in accommodation, it's wonderful for them to keep using that when they're in the diagnostic. Great question. Thanks for asking that. Any other questions about administering the diagnostic before we dive into the data? Sounds like we are good for now. As that changes, you can keep adding questions along the way to the chat or wait till our next question break. But let's dive into that data. I'm switching over to my example teacher account, and I can click on the diagnostic to access my diagnostic action center. You'll notice that this is going to show the same diagnostic data that your students see. This is my first student in alphabetical order, Dorian, but I can jump to any student on my roster. And again, this is exactly what my students will see. Same color, same wording, visuals, everything is the same. So this is a great common reference point for conversations that you might be having with your students around their data, around their progress. This student, Dorian, has not yet completed their initial diagnostic. I can tell because it's reminding them to keep diagnosing to reveal your levels. And when I look at their data, I can see it's showing as a range instead of a single pinpointed number. And some of these strands are also still showing as a range instead of a single star with a pinpointed number. Now, this tells me that Dorian has been working in the diagnostic, but not yet completed, and that's okay. I do not have to wait until the diagnostic is complete to start utilizing this data. And that's really important, especially since we do have diverse learners working at different pace. Even if the student just answers a handful of questions in the diagnostic, that is enough to get the ball rolling. You're going to have analytic insights you can start to work off of. You're going to have targeted recommendations for that student to work on. So you do not need to complete the diagnostic. However, we definitely recommend that over time, the student does complete that diagnostic so that we can get that full profile complete. Let me go ahead and switch over to a student that has completed their diagnostic because I want to show you what it looks like, just so you can see it for your reference. The message changes them to remind them to keep diagnosing to stay up to date because they are up to date. And then we can, and by the way, it's saying that because even though I am up to date, if I want to as a student, I can keep working in the diagnostic. It's not going to, that's an important thing to note. It's not going to kick them out of the diagnostic when they're complete. We do allow them to keep refining and further refine the recommendations and make them even more precise, but they don't need to. Once they are complete, they're fully up to date, and we do recommend that they start practicing these skills. So here's what it looks like. We can see single numbers and single pinpointed stars. These numbers directly correspond to grade level equivalents. So a 700 means the student's working at a beginning 7th grade level. A 900 means beginning 9th grade, and 1100 beginning 11th, and so on. If a student has a 750, that would mean they know about half of the 7th grade material for that strand. So in other words, we're looking at the hundreds place for the grade equivalent, hundreds and thousands. And then we're looking at the tens place for what percentage along the grade they are, with 100 points representing an entire year's worth of growth. That being said, we can see my example here, this student, who, again, my students are rostered to a little bit more younger grade. So this student's working at a 7th grade level in math, about 40%. And overall, their language arts is they're working at a 6th grade level, about 60%, and they're reading at a 5th grade level, about 50% through the 5th grade reading level content. We can also see the specific strands, and this is great for accommodations as well. If we do have students that maybe are overwhelmed or confused by these numbers, they can easily see the visual representation. The farther that star shoots out, the more this is a strength. The shorter strands represent good growth opportunities for the students that we might want to focus in on. And this is all going to be relative to where the student is. So this student has, in fractions, for example, this is their shortest math strand. They're working at a high 5th grade level. This might be great for them if they're a 5th grader, but this might be significantly below them if they're a 9th grade level. So again, it's all relative, but it's going to show their actual functioning working level. Whatever strands are shortest, I can easily identify those. And not only that, but we empower both the teachers and the students with the direct tools right here to take action and do something about that. So we're not just going to say, okay, your lowest strand is fractions, you're a little bit below grade level. we're actually going to show them right here the specific skills that they should work on in order to impact the most change within fractions. These recommendations are highly targeted. No two students are going to have the same recommendations here. Even if another student happens to have a 590 in fractions right now, they're going to have different skills here based on how they got to that 590. So this is truly personalized to really impact Cameron's growth within each strand. Cameron having this up can simply click on a skill and try it, and it will bring them straight to that skill practice. They're up and running, filling in that gap. Now, for many of us, we might have students that have accommodations where this might be too overwhelming for them to use independently. We have a great tool that can facilitate, actually streamline all of this use in the form of that diagnostic action plan that I mentioned. Every student has direct access to their own action plan. And in fact, we encourage the students to access this as often, as frequently as they wish. It is a living, breathing document. It is going to change and grow as the students change and grow. So here's what it looks like today. This is for Cameron. You can see it's date stamped. By the way, this is a PDF, so you can feel free to download this or email it, send it directly to the students or family members if you're worried about them finding it on their own. We're going to see every working or every level, both strengths and growth areas. And we're going to see high impact skills for the student for every single strand, including their strengths. So Cameron's actually really advanced in number and operations for their age. And here are high impact skills that are going to help them move even farther in these high advanced areas. For areas where we want to see more growth, well, we can see the specific skills that are going to help them make that growth. There are built-in links here. So if Cameron has this document open, all they need to do if they want to work on geometry is just click on one of those skills. It will take them straight to that skill, and they're filling in that gap in their understanding. If you have students with accommodations that will not allow them to utilize this plan independently, so for whatever reason, they're just not going to be able to use this independently, it's too overwhelming, whatever the reason, you can use this as the teacher to go in and select high impact skills for the students based on their diagnostic data. So let's say Cameron is a student with an accommodation in which I know that they cannot use this plan independently. All I need to do as their teacher is open up their plan, like I've just done. I want to go to an area where I want to encourage growth. So let's say fractions, because that's their lowest math area. I'll click on a skill. And then after previewing it to determine that it's right for Cameron, well, there's my star tool right there. I can go ahead and directly assign this to Cameron. And I am going to review how to assign skills in the next section. In case you needed that, I'll do a quick review on that. But I just wanted to show how you can easily use the star tool to quickly assign that skill to any student. In other words, I can be as hands-on or hands-off with this action plan as I wish or as I need to be. I can use it to go in and directly manually assign high impact skills to my students based on their data. Or if I do have students that are capable of using this independently, I can conference with those students, set expectations, and have them work on this independently, clicking in and working on skills, checking off the items. It's kind of like a check sheet that they can work through as an independent learning plan for students that we're trying to foster that independence. Now, this whole process is summarized for you in your view diagnostic results. So I'm going to go ahead and click to view my diagnostic results. It's going to bring me to my diagnostic overview page. And this diagnostic overview can also be accessed directly from your dropdown here. It's just two different ways to get to the same place. So however you like to get there, once you're in your diagnostic overview, you can print or save this as a PDF. It will show your class span along the top here, and you can see each student and click on them to access their individual action plans. You can also click at the top here to create one big PDF that will have everybody's action plans all in one convenient document. Well, on the side here, we see the starburst icon next to some students. That means that they have completed their initial diagnostic. So my students that do not have that burst yet, I would check in with them. I would encourage them to spend more time in the diagnostic. I might schedule time specifically for them to go in for maybe another 15 minutes or another 10 minutes. Again, really carving out time specifically to get that complete. But as a reminder, we don't have to wait for it to be complete. We can start using it right out of the gate. So that's a look at our diagnostic data and the diagnostic action plans, as well as how to utilize those for our instructional goals. I'm going to go ahead and pause here again. Any questions about anything we've covered so far before we continue on? Wonderful. Sounds, oh, question. Perfect. Go ahead. I thought I heard a microphone unmute there.
Yeah, that was me. I had a question.
Yeah,
maybe I
absolutely.
missed it because I was maybe 2 minutes late. Are our students automatically rostered, or do we roster them?
That is a good question. I haven't checked your account status to see that. Are you able to access your account?
I think so, yeah. Not
Go
right
ahead.
now, though.
Feel free to check that. I don't know the individual status of your individual rosters. That might be a better question for your administrator. If you have questions about your roster, I can definitely work with you individually after that. We're not really scheduled to go into the rostering during this presentation, though. There's a PDF guide. We can kind of walk you through that. And again, check with your administrator, because your administrator definitely will have the insight on how your account was set up. We actually do offer a variety of different ways that schools can choose to have their rostering done. So it is an administrator choice. Again, I have to pull up that specifically in Salesforce to see how you're set up. So it's probably better to check individually.
So Lil, in the past, Lori has added my roster for me. So she's loaded all the kids for me.
Oh, you're rostering through Clever, I'm seeing here in the chat. Thank you for the assist in the chat. Awesome. If you're rostering through Clever, that is the easiest way. That is automatic for you. You shouldn't have to worry about it. If you are having some issues with your roster not aligning correctly, then we can reach out to the support team. They will be happy to work with you individually on aligning that roster through Clever. But luckily, that's an easy answer to the question. Rostering through Clever is probably our easiest option to automatically get those rosters set up.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for the assist in the chat there, whoever clarified that for us. All right, so we've taken a look at our diagnostic. Now we're going to go ahead and transition towards utilizing IXL for daily instruction.
Sorry, Lori, can I interrupt really quickly?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, I had my hand raised. I was just wondering if we already have a student who started the process, but now that we have this training, is it possible to kind of reset it so they can go through it again?
It is possible. Tech support would have to do that. So there's no way on your end that you can do that. However, what I would say is it's not necessary. Okay. Even if a student already has data on there and maybe that data is not accurate anymore, the beautiful thing about the process being adaptive is as soon as they get on today and start answering questions, it's going to notice, okay, something's not right. You're not where you were before, and it will automatically start to adjust to their appropriate level of where they're at today. Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry to cut that off. I forgot to ask, are there any other questions before I continue on? Okay, sounds like we are good for now. And again, you can keep adding to the chat as well. I want to go ahead and turn us to the curriculum. We do offer over 8,000 skills here to really support wherever your students are in their learning journey. Knowing that we do have diverse learners, this is going to be really crucial. We can access the curriculum by clicking on the Learning tab. It is going to default you to math, which is furthest to the left, but if you're utilizing language arts, feel free to just tab over to language arts. Our content works exactly the same way. So it doesn't matter what subject or what grade the student's working at. We keep that consistent. For whichever subject you're working in, you can click in and see the grades. You do have open access. With math, of course, our high school content is broken down to the mathematic practices, algebra, geometry, algebra 2, etc. But you can click into that corresponding grade or mathematic practice and see all of the skill practice available for that topic or grade. When you hover over the skills, you will see a nice little skill preview, giving you an indication of the type of questions that your students would be asked to work on were you to assign this skill. You will also notice that you do have open access. Both you and your students have open access. So you will be able to tab in and access skills. For example, we probably are going to have some students that do need to review some skills, maybe from middle school content, and they will have dynamic access to those. Again, the diagnostic is going to recommend skills to them based on where they actually are. And if they do have below grade level needs, those will be in their action plan as well. This is just our default view. And in fact, this is probably the most overwhelming or intimidating way to view the skills because you're viewing everything at once. And you can see there's hundreds of skills per grade. We definitely don't expect students to complete every skill that's on here. So it's always going to be your call what your students do on IXL and what it is you might choose for them to do elsewhere. This view, though, of viewing the skills by grade is just our default view. In addition to that, we also offer IXL topics. So again, this is specific to the subject. So just to switch up my examples, if you're working in language arts, you would click language arts and go into topics and see the topics for the subject you're in. You can click into any of these and see all of the skill practice for this topic across grade levels. This can be a great way to see the progression of concepts, particularly skills that do have standards across multiple grade levels. So for example, when we talk about determining the main idea of a passage, we see this in 12th grade. Here it is in 11th grade. Here it is in 10th grade. We actually see it down here through 6th and middle school skills. We can even see the same skill down here in 4th grade. Same concept, same topic, determining the main idea of a passage, but just written at different instructional levels aligned with the standards and expectations for those grades. As IXL teachers, you have open access, so you can assign skills to students regardless of their rostered grade, while still staying within the same topic. So that can be really powerful for your differentiation. We also offer IXL skill plans. And the skill plans are our textbook standards and test prep alignments. I love sharing these skill plans because they all have the same goal in mind. They're all designed to help save you time on the planning stage, to help guide you towards the best skills for students to work on based on either textbooks, standards, or test prep goals. So I pinned a couple at the top that I know are relevant for you all. We'll come back to that in a moment, but I wanted to mention that we do have these bookmarks. So you can jump to standards, textbooks, or test prep skill plans. You're also able to filter by subject. So you can default to a specific subject or all subjects, and you can also filter for specific grades. So you can search within a specific grade or grade band. Once you've made any subject selections at the top there, you can scroll down or jump with the bookmarks. And let's go ahead and take a look at what's offered here. So I'm actually going to switch over to math, but again, it will work the same way regardless of subject. And for every, starting with the state standards here, we can click into any subject, such as Algebra 2. We will be able to either jump with the bookmarks or scroll down. We'll see the standard listed on the left and the skills on IXL that support that standard on the right. There might be multiple skills supporting a standard, so using that preview can help determine which skill specifically is going to best support your instructional goals around a particular standard that you're working on, taking the guesswork out of making sure student practice aligns with those standards-based goals and objectives. In addition to our state standards alignment, we do also have alignment with several popular textbooks and curriculums. I know the ELA team isn't using a set curriculum, but you might be supplementing with curriculum resources here and there. And I do know that some of you in the math team are using Big Ideas, for example, and all of these curriculums are going to work the same way. So for any resource that you might be using, like Big Ideas, for example, you can click into the subject, let's say Algebra 1. You'll see the chapters listed or units, depending on the curriculum, and you'll see each lesson and the skills specifically on IXL that support that lesson. Again, there might be multiple, so the preview helps narrow it down, and you might also get some of these also considered as additional supplementary practice opportunities. This, again, time saving, because if I'm teaching with Big Ideas, and I know I'm in lesson 1-1, I know what's best for my students to work on when I do transition them to their independent practice, taking the guesswork out of it. If you are utilizing any curriculum or textbooks that you do not see on here yet, even if it's just something you supplement with, that's a great thing for you to send me an email about after the session wraps, because I can forward that email directly to our curriculum team, and they're expanding on these offerings on an ongoing basis. So just let us know where we should expand next. In addition to the textbook and curriculums, we also do have alignment with several popular test prep and college placement exams as well. So if you happen to utilize formative data like MAP data and WEA, for example, or if you do have students that are preparing for advanced college placement exams like PSAT, ACT, or ACT Aspire and SAT, well, all of these skill plans have the same idea. They're going to guide the students towards the best skills based on scores that they're getting. So for example, if I do have students preparing for their ACT, let's say, for example, let's go over to the student side. I want to show you what that looks like. When the students open up an ACT or SAT skill plan, it actually is interactive. It allows them to create their own learning plan. So first time I sit down to work on my ACT practice, I'm going to click create my own plan. Keep in mind, if you have students with severe accommodations, you can absolutely log in and do this for the students as well. Or this can be a guided activity where we sit with the students and do it with them. We're simply going to enter our scores. It's a lot easier to just enter the overall scores, but if you have those sub scores, you can enter those as well. And it will generate an individual study plan for the student. You're entering scores based on the practice exam that they've taken. So if they've taken a practice ACT or practice PSAT, if they have not yet taken a practice exam, that's okay. They can just enter the scores for the range that they are aiming for initially, and it will generate a plan from there. So just an FYI for our students that are preparing or have the requirement to take any advanced or college placement exams. All these skill plans work, as you saw, the same way. They all guide you towards specific skills based on scores, textbooks and curriculums, or our state standards. Now, for any of these skill plans that you find yourself using frequently, such as the standards, or for those of you that are teaching with big ideas, we recommend taking a moment to pin that skill plan for easy access. That way you won't have to go scrolling and looking for it each time. To pin a skill plan, simply locate the plan and click on the pin icon next to the grade or grades that you teach. Once I've pinned a skill plan, it will now be pinned at the top here, so I won't have to go scrolling and looking for it each time. In fact, now I can just click on my skill plan button each time, and it will show whatever plans I have currently pinned. If a teacher pins a skill plan, it will also be pinned for the students. So now the student can just come in and click on the same button on their account, skill plans. And let's say I'm doing big ideas, I can click in and follow along that way. So that's one potential way for students to follow along if they know they're in lesson 1-1, or for parents who are involved, or if they want to get a sense of the pacing, the curriculum mapping. This is just another way for them to have some clarity or transparency rather about the progression and where they're going. In addition to using those skill plans, which I'm a big fan of, we also do have the ability to simply use the search bar. If you haven't had a chance to use that search bar, it's pretty effective. You can type out whatever it is you're looking for. So, maybe you need some review this week on fractions. You can just search for that. You'll be able to actually search for a specific grade. So maybe you want that at the algebra level, or maybe you're working with a student who's working at a 6th grade level. So you want to see the 6th grade skills, or, maybe both. So you can filter for whatever you wish and use a preview to narrow down your results. Fractions is a very broad search. As you see here, I could type out partial phrases. I can type out connected ideas. You can actually type out specifically what it is that you're looking for. So that's a really efficient way to just browse the whole platform freely. If you're ever sitting there wondering, I wonder if IXL has skill practice on blank. Well, you can just type that into the search bar, filter for your grade or grades, and see our full alignment and take it from there. It doesn't matter how you go about finding the skill. Once you have found that skill that matches your objective or goal, the next step, of course, is to assign that skill to our students. IXL does offer a few different ways for you to simply assign skills to your students so that they know what they should be working on anytime and anywhere. I'm going to walk you through these options now, and you can choose the way that works or combination that works best for you. The first option is to directly suggest the skill to the students using our star tool. This gray star icon that you see appearing just to the left of each skill. And this star icon appears across the platform. So if you're using those skill plans, you will also see the star there. Anywhere you see that star, you can directly assign using that tool. Here's how it works. If this is the skill that I know I want my students to work on, I'm going to take my mouse and I'll simply hover my mouse over the star. It pops up this suggestion window. I'll show that one more time. I just take my mouse, I just hover over the star, pops up the window for me. Now from here, I can assign this skill to all of my students. But granted, it's probably few and far between that there's a skill every single student on your roster needs to work on. Most of the time, you're going to need to be more specific. Perhaps you teach multiple classes or periods throughout the day, or you want to assign to just individuals. Well, if you do have multiple classes, those classes will appear here based on your roster. Again, this is integrated and synced with Clever, so you don't need to do any additional changes. It's going to match with your roster. On my roster, I do have 2 classes. So you can see here they are. One of my classes is labeled demo accounts, and my other class is labeled as a 5th grade class. So I can assign this to either class by simply clicking on the star next to that class. It just assigned it to all 60 students in this very large demo accounts class. And of course, I can also assign just to individual students as well. So let's say they're fifth graders. I'll click on my fifth grade list. I can go through and click on student stars individually. And just like that, it'll be assigned to just those individual students. Students are going to see these starred skills show up on their recommendation wall when they first log in. And in a little bit, we'll navigate over to that so you can see what that looks like firsthand. But before I leave the teacher side, I want to show you how you can remove these suggestions. So the teacher is the only person, the sole controller of the stars. IXL does not, this is one thing that we don't mess with in any way. We're not going to add stars, and we're certainly not going to remove these stars. So when you have decided that you are ready for your students to move on, all you need to do is simply remove those stars by retracing your steps. Hover over the star again to open up your options. You can click on a class to remove it, gray it out, or I can click in and click on student stars individually. You may have already noticed this with your students, but when they begin practicing a skill, you will see their SMART score in parentheses next to their name. So you can very easily see which students have reached your SMART score goal and are ready to move on, and which ones should keep it starred for them to keep working. Keep in mind, if you just click on the star from the top, it will remove it from everybody. So if you want to easily remove a star from everybody, you can just click on it to unassign it from everybody all at once. When I click into a skill, I will see that within the skill, the star tool is right there. And this was what I showed you earlier with those diagnostic action plans. When you open up your action plan, if you click on a skill and you want to assign it to a student, there's the star right there. So you can just go ahead and assign that to the specific student whose plan the skill was in. In addition to using the star tool, you'll notice on the right side of your screen here some additional sharing options. The first option in there allows you to create a shareable link, and you can copy and paste that link anywhere you wish. Class websites or learning management systems. If you're emailing or posting assignments, you'll simply click on or post that link, they click on it, and it will take them straight to this specific skill. Each skill has its own unique URL address, so that'll be a direct link straight to where you need them to be. We also do have integration with Google Classroom. So if you're a Google Classroom user, you can sign into that account. You can click on your green Google Classroom icon, and that will link this assignment to your Google account. And you can manage your assignments within Google from there. The final option for sharing skills is to simply identify the skill by its search shortcut code and have the student enter that code. Each skill has its own unique code. This one's PMN, and anyone can type that into the search bar to pull up that skill as the first search result. PMN. It's going to be that first skill that pops up, and I click on it and it brings me to this skill. This can be good for students that do have enough independent autonomy to be able to be self-directed and enter skills. However, if you do have students with accommodations, this might not be the best option because it does require them to enter the code accurately. So I might give them the code PMN, but they might, mistype it and enter and end up somewhere else. So again, kind of use at your discretion, but it can also be really simple or can simplify your lesson planning. If you're, especially for internal referencing where you don't have to worry about student accommodation, if you want to just list out, okay, Monday we're doing ALW, Tuesday we're doing KGR, that's one way you can chart out skills for internal reference. And then again, you could also just assign the skills to the students by posting that same information. Tuesday we're working on KGR. Feel free to still star the skill, even if you are giving the code. That way when they enter KGR, and they go to the skill, it'll be starred for them, and that will just confirm that they're in the right place. So you can essentially double cover your bases if you want to use this strategy. But again, starring the skill is the best way to directly ensure that the student will see it as one of their starred skills for them on their recommendation assignment list. I do want to mention, if you are assigning skills to students, especially from the diagnostic, you're almost certainly going to find that you do need to assign some skills to students that are going to be below their rostered grade level. And of course, if let's say I'm an Algebra 1 student, a ninth grader, I might not be too happy about working on skills that are labeled as a 6th or 7th grade skill. And then, of course, with diverse learners, we almost certainly will have some students that do need to review skills that might be even more significantly below grade level. If this is a concern, you do have the ability to hide these grade levels altogether wherever they would appear. To hide the grade levels, you're simply going to come up to your name in the top right corner there and click that drop down right next to your name. Then we're going to select the middle option here for profile and settings. In fact, this is where we go whenever we want to make changes to our account. From here, if I scroll down just a little bit, I will see the option to hide grade levels is not enabled by default. So I'll just go ahead and click into here and choose for whom I wish to hide them from. So I can hide them from, individual classes, individuals, or from everybody. Just making sure I click that submit button to update and register that change. It's going to switch everything over to their alphabet representation. That same Algebra 1 student might be more open to working on a level I or a level H skill. So just a social emotional consideration that's built in if you would like to utilize it. I'm going to switch mine back to the numerical values by just retracing my steps back into my profile and settings, and I'm just going to uncheck that box and click submit to update that. No matter how you're assigning skills to students, you do need to remind them to make sure that they are signed into IXL before they start practicing, especially if you're just going to be posting the link by using the share skill link. Well, it's a public link. Anyone can click on that link. If they just click on the link without signing in, they're going to end up answering the 10 free practice questions that IXL allows to signed out users, but none of those results will be saved. So I always told my students, step 1 of IXL is always check to make sure you see your name in that corner. Students also have this avatar. So you can say check to make sure you see your avatar or icon, because they can change and swap out that avatar based on their awards that they unlock. And that's a good eyeball test for students to make sure that they are logged in before they begin practicing. If they forget, it's not the end of the world. They will get a login prompt on the 11th question. But again, the results of those first 10 won't be saved. It's not going to repeat. So they'll get new questions, but we don't want them to feel frustrated like they wasted their time, even though a little practice probably won't kill them. We want to value that time. So just making sure we build that habit of checking to make sure that we are signed in before we begin practicing. All right, having covered how we're going to find and assign those skills, as we transition here, I'm going to pause once again. Any questions about anything we've covered so far before we transition into the actual delivery of the content? Wonderful. Sounds like we're good. I'm just going to double check the chat, just make sure I'm not missing anything there. Wonderful. As we continue on here, once the students have been assigned that skill and they do begin practicing, you have an amazing tool for controlling or monitoring your students, the questions that they see for any guided instruction that you might be doing. So normally when you assign a skill to a student and they click into a skill, I'm just going to jump into one at random here. You're probably already familiar with this, but all of our content is personalized. So the student is getting an individual question that's generated for them. Even if I look to my neighbor, if they're working on the same question and they have the same score or same skill, they're going to have a different version of the question waiting for them. So this is great because it's personalized. It means there's no temptation for cheating or copying, but it creates a challenge when you want to control the content that the students are seeing. For example, if I'm doing whole group or even small group instruction and we all want to work on the same thing together. So that's where our group jam feature really shines. The group jam allows you to pick a skill and have guided content with the students as you work through that skill. Group jam is available for all of our content across math and language arts. For any skill that you want to work on with your students, you're simply going to click into that skill. And again, I can preview this. I'm seeing this. I'm interacting with the skill just like my students are. When I'm ready to pull them into some whole group or small group, I'm just going to click this Start the Group Jam button. So this is over in the bottom right corner in your teacher toolbox. When I click to start that group jam, it will ask me who I would like to pull into this jam with me. It can be all students. Maybe I'm going to pull an individual class at a time. Or maybe I just want to pull individuals. So maybe I'm going to do small group and I just want to pull these 4 students, or even just one student. You can even just use this one-on-one partner work, again, however you're utilizing it. Once you've selected who you're going to pull for that jam, you'll scroll to the bottom and start that group jam. It will start you off with your first question. And this question won't be the same that my students see. So this is -4, -2. When I switch over, I'm going to go ahead now and switch over to my student account. Students will need to click in to join the jam. So just an FYI, little logistics here to handle. It's not going to pull them into the jam automatically. They do need to click this Join the Jam button. And then they'll be pulled in automatically and we can guide and control what they're seeing on their screen on the teacher side. So here's that same question, -4, -2, that the teacher had up on their screen. But now I'm able to answer this and input my answer individually. It doesn't mean I have to work independently. So if I'm working with a partner, that's great. We can turn and talk, we can do group work, and then I can turn to my computer and input my own response when I'm ready. I'm gonna go ahead and let's just intentionally miss this one. We'll see that when a student makes a mistake while learning, it's gonna support them with instructive feedback. So they're gonna get supplementary information, they get a detailed step-by-step explanation to that specific problem that they just missed. This is great because it's allowing the students something to review and reinforce while they wait. Because while I've done my answer, I've missed this, I cannot go on to the next question. I'm waiting for the teacher to move us on to the next question. So this gives me something to utilize in that time. Maybe I'm taking notes or journaling if that's part of their practice, or I'm just, again, getting that solidification of how to arrive at the correct answer. Let's go back over to the teacher side. The teacher is seeing those student responses come in, and they're summarized here. And also I can see each student's avatar will appear here once they answer. And then I can hover over the avatar to see who is who. So I'll see their name and then what they answered. Once I have the responses in and I'm ready to review, I'm going to click to move to review. And that's going to move everybody over to the same guided review that they saw while they were waiting. I'm seeing that same detailed explanation at how to arrive at the correct answer, but now I can explain this in my own teacher way. So maybe I want to rephrase this in my own voice. Maybe I want to call on students to share their thinking and share aloud. Maybe I'm going to prompt students to record specific pieces of information in their journals. Again, however I want to do my instructional delivery, but we have this guided context here to work off of. After we've reviewed that question, I have a question to answer, and then I have a choice. My question is, how did my students do? Which is summarized here. And then my next question is, where should we go next? Did we do well on that one? And maybe we're ready for a harder version of the question. Or maybe we didn't do so well and we should stay on the same level. Or maybe we were already working on a harder question and it didn't go so well, and maybe we should jump back down to an easier question. So you'll make that choice and select it, and it will automatically generate a new question based on your choice. So I went to a harder question. You can see now it's asking me to actually graph the coordinate there. And my students will also now be moved over to this new question. And I'm able to repeat this as many times as I need to as I move through my instructional delivery, either whole group or small group. At any point, I know my students will get the hang of it. And so they might be ready to be released. Maybe they're raising their hand and they're answering, participating, and I know they got it. When they're ready to be removed from the jam, I can easily add or remove students by simply clicking on this add or remove students button. I can click on students to individually remove them from the jam when they're ready. Or if I have students joining late, I can add them to the jam as well. Clicking update will update who is in my jam. And I can also end the whole thing together whenever I'm ready. So I'll go ahead and do that now by clicking end the jam. It'll ask me to confirm that. And then now it's going to end this for all of my students. So let's go back over to the student side. You can see the prompt here is telling them that the jam has ended. And then now they have this option to click in and now go to the specific skill that we were just working on. In other words, I'm transitioning them to begin their independent practice. We just worked on it together. I'm going to release you now. When they click on that, it's going to bring them to their independent practice. Now I am once again seeing an individual version of the question. So if I look to my neighbor's screen, they're going to have a different question on their screen. And I can go ahead and progress, and I see it's going to scale up as I advance. Let's go ahead and talk about the skill practice now, since we're here, and let's talk about what's happening with the skills, what's happening behind the scenes, and then most importantly, how to set good SMART score goals with your students. So when the students begin working, well, if I did just transition from a group jam, then they probably don't need any review because we just reviewed it. But let's say they're working on this later that day, as homework later that night or the next day. Well, when they first start sitting down to practice the skill, they do have the option here to click in at the top and learn with an example. This is going to be a great way for them to activate background knowledge and connect to those important concepts that you covered with them in your instruction. This is also great for any family members who are helping out at home and need that extra review, especially if it's been a while since they did geometry. So they're going to see the same type of information they saw during the explanation key ideas, and then a step-by-step example or solution to that example question. Again, if they're taking notes or journaling, this will be really great for pre-active or activating that background knowledge. Once they do click to go back to the practice, there are always a few things that are happening along the right side of the screen here as the students work their way through any given skill. So as I begin to answer questions correctly, I'll get some positive reinforcement, which encourages me along and lets me know I'm on the right track. It's tracking how many questions I've answered as well as how long I worked on this skill. Time doesn't affect their score in any way. It just provides context. And all of this is tied to this skill. If I do need to take a break and pause for any reason, I can always stop and come back, and my progress will be saved and ready for me to pick up right where I left off. So sometimes students will accidentally click around. They might accidentally close their window when they're working, or you might interrupt or pause their work so that you can address a teaching point with them. All of that's okay. As soon as they go back to that skill, it will pick up right where they left off. So as soon as they hit enter or click submit, all progress is saved automatically. With each correct answer, you might have noticed that my SMART score in the red box there was increasing each time I got an answer correct. And also the difficulty or rigor is going to gradually continue to scale up. So as I demonstrate my understanding, I will see more complex variants of the questions that are being asked. I'd like you to note where my SMART score is now, because I'm going to go ahead now and intentionally make a mistake so that we can see what that looks like when our learners do make a mistake. We know it's going to happen, of course. And as soon as they make a mistake, you'll see the SMART score did change a little bit to reflect that. We're going to come back to that in just a moment. But immediately they'll see the correct answer. They're going to get that same detailed explanation that they always get whenever they're working on a question, tailored to the specific question they just missed. Again, not a generic example. We are going to guide them step by step at arriving at that correct answer. Once they've had a chance to review this feedback and they click the got it button, because of the adaptive nature, the next question they get is going to be a slightly easier version of the question they just missed. And this is because we want the students to apply that clarified understanding with a higher degree of success, so that when they do answer subsequent questions correctly, they'll notice that they're able to recoup SMART score points they may have temporarily lost. You can see here for me, it just jumped past where I was before I made that mistake. It jumped me all the way up to 40, which I hadn't even reached yet. So the SMART score, as you can see, is designed to not only be very forgiving of those mistakes, but also very rewarding of that careful reflection. Whenever we do make mistakes, we know it's going to happen. And every year for me, it was about building a culture and expectation with my students that when we make a mistake, you know, it was like without fail, with like almost like clockwork. Every year they make a mistake, they just want to click that got it button. They just want to rush on to the next question. They're like, okay, yeah, I missed it. I don't care. I want to move on. So instead, of course, and easier said than done, obviously, but we want to work to build an expectation, a culture where the students know when they make a mistake to not just click and rush on to the next question, but to slow down and use it as the growth opportunity that it is, to grow academically stronger. And IXL will give them all the feedback that they need to make that growth. And we let them make as many mistakes as they need to. So they'll have as many chances as they need to make mistakes, learn from them, and ultimately show that they can do it. So you see, I've made a couple mistakes while I've been demonstrating with you right now, but I'm still making steady and consistent progress towards my SMART score goal. In this way, your students will never be eliminated or prevented from reaching that goal, no matter how much they may struggle initially or along the way. The SMART score is designed to be flexible and forgiving. The SMART score will monitor their progress and they will receive achievement ribbons as they reach different SMART score benchmarks. Someone asked in the chat there, I'll just address this here. Someone asked, is there a step-by-step instruction book for all these procedures? We do not have a physical book. However, there is actually a IXL workbook that is available through Amazon. It would definitely be an additional separate purchase if you were interested in that book resource. Beyond that, we do offer that tailored instruction when the students are working, again, to provide the step-by-step feedback each and every time there is a mistake. But to clarify, IXL is never meant to be the student's first introduction to any of these concepts. IXL is specifically designed to help reinforce the student's understanding of concepts that you've already been covering with them. So we don't want to have a student work on IXL. They've never worked on a concept. We don't want to have them just sit down and try to learn through that. We want to give quality instruction to the students and then transition them to their independent practice, and they will get that instructive feedback as they work through the platform. They get achievement ribbons as they reach different benchmarks. They get their first one at 70, another at 80, which is proficiency, another at 90, which is excellence, and a gold medal when they reach a SMART score of 100, which indicates mastery. And the SMART score itself is unique to IXL. It's pretty special. It's our own proprietary scoring system designed to give you the most accurate measure of your student's understanding of a skill. It's also part of the key to driving student engagement and confidence on the platform, since it is so forgiving of those mistakes. Here we see a typical progression that a student might go through for any given skill. It doesn't matter where or along the way or how many mistakes they make, they can always learn from those mistakes, grow, and recoup those points. So it stays very motivating. The SMART score does range from 0 to 100, as we just reviewed, but it's important to note that the SMART score is not a percentage. This is not a percentage-based score. And definitely for high schoolers, it's a little harder for those kids to wrap their heads around it because they're likely very used to seeing 0 to 100 and thinking of that as a percentage. But unlike a traditional percentage score of simply how many they got right out of how many there were, well, the reason we call this a SMART score in the first place is that algorithm is actually going to analyze multiple variables each time it adjusts their score. It's going to analyze things like question difficulty. In other words, all questions do not have the same weight. It's also analyzing student accuracy, of course, and also student consistency, which I always appreciated because let's say you have a lucky guesser and they guess their way early on. Well, they're going to see variance of that later on, and the score will not necessarily be affected in the same way at that point, especially if we've been able to determine that they were guessing. We're going to move them to the appropriate level based on where they're at today. So it will move them dynamically to where they're demonstrating they're at today. It's going to be a very dynamic adjustment. So we don't expect to see our students' SMART scores increasing or decreasing by the same set increment each time, like you would with a percentage-based score. It's going to be a much more responsive and fluid adjustment than that to reflect our current level of practice. You can definitely interpret the SMART score as a good predictor of performance outside of IXL. So even though it's not a summative percentage-based score, you can use it as a good predictor of how they might perform. So if a student reaches a SMART score of 85 on a skill, for example, we could expect a similar score on a test of that skill, a more summative percentage-based test of that skill. The SMART score of 100, as we mentioned, does indicate mastery. You can think of that like an A+. So not an A, but an A+. In other words, your very highest possible standard. And mastery in IXL is challenging to achieve. Some of you have definitely experienced that firsthand with your students, which means that a SMART score of 100 is not necessarily going to be an appropriate goal to set for your students, especially students with diverse accommodations. Instead, most of our teachers prefer to start with a SMART score goal of anywhere between 70 and 90. Now, when I say most of our teachers, I am referring to our Gen Ed population teachers. As teachers of diverse learners, you can absolutely feel free to set a SMART score that's much more aligned with your expectations and what you know for your specific students. We recommend starting with anywhere from 70 to 90. So with diverse learners, 70 might be a good starting goal to get a baseline of how your students respond to SMART score goals. If you're noticing after the first few skills that you work with on your students and you're noticing, okay, with my kids, getting to 70 is a big challenge, that might be an end goal. We might need to start with a much lower goal. So maybe for my diverse learner, our initial goal is 40. And then we're going to scale up to 70 over the course of a unit. You can absolutely start with a lower goal when you first introduce that topic and then challenge students to grow over the course of that unit. But the best thing about the SMART score not being a percentage is the students can always go beyond your original goal. So even if you do set a goal, maybe of 40 or 50, Students that are ready or capable can always go beyond that initial goal and reach for 70, 80, or 90, or even mastery. Now, the research has shown that having students reach a SMART score of 70 is where we definitively will see that measurable impact on their performance outside of IXL. And that's why we recommend students work to at least that 70 by the time they would move on from a skill. With diverse learners, it doesn't mean that they have to get to 70 right away on the very first day, but definitely by the time we move on from the unit, by the time I unassign that skill or they abandon it, we want to make sure they get to 70 just so that we know we'll see some meaningful impact. So that might be an end unit goal. Maybe when we start the unit or start the skill, I announce, okay, class, today the goal is going to be 40, but by Friday, then the goal is 70, or 80 if you want to push a little bit. So you can kind of play around with that flexibility. Now, I do want to make an important clarification here. We refer to this as setting the SMART score goal, but you might also think of it as you're communicating the SMART score goal to your students, because you're going to communicate the goal to them off of IXL. In other words, the SMART score is the one thing that you don't set inside of IXL. You simply communicate the goal to them using your normal communication channels. So if we're in person, it's a lot easier. I can just announce, like I mentioned before, okay, class today, the goal is 40. Maybe I write that on the board. Everybody work till you reach a SMART score of 40, and then you can transition to your next activity. Or if you're feeling up for it, you can go beyond that goal of 40 and try, in that intrinsic motivation to go beyond the teacher's goal. And then once you're feeling confident using IXL, you can definitely start to play around with the flexibility of the SMART score. You can absolutely feel free to have different students working to different SMART score goals based on differentiation and different accommodations they might have. Or as I mentioned, you can scale a goal as you move through that unit. All right, I'm going to play a brief video here about the SMART score, and then right after this will be another good opportunity for us to pause just to see if there are any questions before we move on. So I'll pause for questions right after this.
The SMART score is IXL's secret ingredient. It's the best possible measure of a learner's understanding of a skill, and it's the key to driving student success and confidence. Let's take a look at how it works and separate the fact from the fiction. Unlike traditional scoring, the IXL SMART score analyzes question difficulty, answer accuracy, and consistency to pinpoint students' level of comprehension. As students answer questions, their SMART score moves up and down between 0 and 100, and questions become harder or easier to challenge them at the perfect level. While students are still learning, the goal is to build a strong foundation. As they become more confident with the material and answer questions correctly, their SMART score increases. Whenever a question is missed, detailed explanations help set students back on the right track. And once a student has proven that they have an excellent level of understanding, they move into the challenge zone and really put their knowledge to the test. Inside the challenge zone, students don't just demonstrate their skill comprehension, but true mastery. Students must work carefully, read explanations, and really focus on the problem in front of them. Questions in the challenge zone can be difficult, and it may take longer to make strides, so students should feel free to take breaks and return to the skill later. Their progress will be saved, and they can always continue practicing and improving. A SMART score goal doesn't always have to be 100. It all depends on the student and the skill. 90 is considered excellent, and 80 shows a strong grasp of the skill, which may be appropriate when first introducing a concept. Start with an initial goal of 80 and challenge students to grow from there. Want to see the SMART score in action? Visit IXL.com.
All right, that's our initial look at the SMART score goals, and the skill practice itself. Any questions here before we continue on? Wonderful. Sounds like we are good for now. Before we leave this section, I do want to cover a couple extra features that can help with the delivering of your lesson. I did want to mention, in case you weren't already using it, when you open up any skill, In addition to using that group jam, I do want to highlight that you have the ability to jump to different levels of rigor within any given skill. So if you want to jump up to higher levels of complexity within a skill for your demonstrations or your modeling, or if you need to jump back down when you're demonstrating, you do have the flexibility to jump freely amongst those levels. This can be used in combination with the group jam. So if I wanted to start with a higher level of rigor, I can jump up to that appropriate level, and then I can go ahead and start a group jam at that level. I won't be locked in. I can definitely jump down to lower levels when in the middle of that jam if I need to. But again, you can kind of tailor your instructional goals based on that tool. I also do want to mention that you have some other great features in your profile and settings. So if I go back up to my name in the corner there and click profile and settings, in addition to hiding grade levels, which we looked at earlier, you have the option to hide the timer from student view. Many students do have IEP accommodations where those timers or on-screen timers can be distracting or create anxiety. So feel free to remove those timers from student view if you wish. We also do have audio support. Now, our audio support is going to be a little limited when it comes to high schoolers because we do have a cap on our audio support. We can extend the audio support up to 8th grade for math. So definitely you will have some students that are working on skills in middle school level. They might benefit from that audio support. You can enable that for up to 8th grade for math and through 5th grade for ELA. So again, for ELA especially, might not be super relevant for most of your learners. However, I did want to mention, if you want to enable that audio support, you do so from your profile and settings. Same thing with our built-in Spanish language support, which we do have limited functionality for in math, specifically in our pre-K through geometry content. Now, the good news is, if you are working with students beyond those limits of our audio support, or maybe, for example, working with students that speak other native languages other than Spanish, well, feel free to use IXL in combination with other third-party text-to-speech or translation programs that you probably are already using with your students. So anything that's web-based is going to be compatible with IXL. Many browsers already offer built-in options for this now. There's great software, great programs available for text-to-speech and translation for web-based programs. So feel free to utilize that. Anytime you make changes to your profile, just make sure you click that submit button. All right, I do want to go ahead now and navigate over to the student account. And I want to mention that recommendation wall. I mentioned that when you star skills for your students, this is their landing page. This will be the first thing that they see when they sign in. Let's say they're exploring though, and they get away from this page, they can always come back by clicking learning and recommendations. As soon as they sign in, they'll see that bright yellow orange star indicating their teacher suggested skills. I kind of went overboard. I have a lot pinned here. A great accommodation, by the way, if you do have students that struggle with organization, feel free to limit the amount of currently suggested skills. So if I have a student with a strong accommodation where they get overwhelmed by multiple concurrent assignments, I can choose to have just 1 or maybe 2 skills starred at a time for that student. So I can simplify this list if needed. Students are then able to, of course, click into their teacher suggested skills and begin working on those targeted skills. In addition to the starred skills, IXL will also offer up targeted recommendations based on everything the student's doing across the platform. And these are personalized for each student, and they're chosen, again, not at random. So if another student is working at the same level, they look to their neighbor, they're going to have completely different skills on their recommendation wall. This is built around menu or choice system, if you've ever used that type of framework, where IXL will carefully select high impact skills for the student to choose from. But when they sit down, they get to pick the specific skill that they want to work on, which means this is for areas of your practice where you specifically want to foster more student choice, more student agency. Not necessarily what we're doing all day, every day. It might not even be the best option for all students, but again, this is here as an additional resource or a supplement to what you're doing. This can be a great thing for students to transition to if you're looking for bell work or warm-up activities. This is also a great thing for early finishers. You can build a routine where your early finishers will just transition to their recommendation wall while they wait for the rest of the class to catch up. This can be something you integrate if you are doing centers or station rotation with your students. It can be something that you schedule as just open exploration time. So maybe every Friday We all work on our recommendations for 40 minutes while I go around and I conference with students personally, individually, or I do my small group instruction. Infinite ways that you could use this. It's also just a great thing to teach students and parents about. If they're coming to you and saying, okay, what else can I do? Or what else can we do with our child at home in addition to your assignments? Well, the recommendation wall is a great place to direct those. It is truly personalized for their student. It is high impact skills that their student needs in order to move forward. And it's never out of date. I can scroll and it's infinite. So I can scroll for forever and ever. It'll keep generating new practice, new ideas for me to explore. If I reach proficiency on a skill, it will update my plan, my wall here, remove those old skills and add new targeted ones based on my growth. So just a really great resource. I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of those recommendation walls. It's a self-automated tool. You don't have to lift a finger as a teacher. It's just a great resource to make sure students know to utilize. All right, we did the jump a level, so let's go ahead and move into monitoring our students' progress. Once the students have begun working, you actually have a great tool for monitoring them in real time, and that's our live classroom. So going back to my teacher account, I'm going to click on Analytics, and I'll go furthest to the right for this lightning bolt icon for our live classroom. Now, this is specifically for monitoring your students in real time. So if they're online right now and you want to know how that practice is going, pull up the live classroom so you can see. I don't have any of my imaginary students online practicing right now, right? It's just my one avatar in there. So there's not really anything happening in my live classroom. So I'm actually just going to play this video and narrate what we see happening in the video so that you can see what it looks like when a class is in full swing. And we do hear from teachers all the time that this is their favorite report in IXL Analytics because it allows you to be everywhere at once when your students are working. For every student who's online, you're going to see a tile for them with their name, along with information to support them. If they're working on a skill, you'll see the name of the skill and changes to their SMART score as they occur in real time. You'll see how many questions they've answered, as well as how they answered the last 5 questions. Green dashes being correct answers and red dashes being incorrect answers. Most of these tiles are going to be shaded white, indicating the student is making good progress. Occasionally, we might see a tile shaded blue, stating that they're in the diagnostic arena, along with how many questions they've answered that session. And we might also see some tiles turn pink or red, indicating that student has hit a trouble spot. They've missed 3 or more of the last 5 questions, and they would benefit from some additional instructive support. Now, you do have some great tools as a teacher to sort or organize this for your convenience. The first option is to click the sort by dropdown and organize by first or last names. So you can easily find specific students that you're looking for. For those of you that are teaching multiple classes or periods throughout the day, you'll want to click in the top left corner, that class dropdown menu, and select the specific class that you have in front of you. This is crucial if your students are rotating throughout the day. You want to have the right students in front of you as you monitor them in your live classroom. You can also group together students by the skill they're working on by clicking that group by skill toggle. That'll show you who is together working on the same skill and any students that might be off doing their own thing, or any inactive students at the bottom there that haven't answered anything in the last 60 minutes. At any point, you can click on a student's questions answered part of their tile to pop up a question log of their recent work. You can message students directly by clicking that blue paper plane icon for our live messaging tool. So here it looks like the student is forgetting to regroup, so the teacher's just typing a reminder. This is going to be sent over to the student in real time. Shows up on the screen. Here's what it looks like. Pops up, and then they can reply back with a symbol or emoji type reply. Don't need to do any mouse or keyboard interaction or any keyboard interactions. They just click a symbol-based response. You can refresh to see those symbol responses, and then you can follow up with more text or use one of our preset replies to save time. So you're not only able to know how and where your students are spending their time, but you can also reach out and directly support them based on what you're noticing. Occasionally, you might notice that a student kind of wandered off on a random skill, like Quinn here. Let's say I did expect my students to be working on a specific skill. I go to Quinn and they're off on a random skill. Well, I can message that student specifically, and using my share skill link button, I can post the link to the skill directly into my message. That way, when it pops up on their screen, they just click that blue message or click that blue link and it brings them to the skill that the rest of the class is on. Hovering over the plane will reveal recent messages. And lastly, you might see a tile shaded gray with a paused icon. So this student, Roy, has gone idle. They stopped interacting with the site. The teacher's typing a reminder a friendly reminder to get back on track. Basically, they're asking if they need help getting back on track. You're also able to message your whole class directly. So clicking the plain icon next to student activity wall allows you to send a message to your whole group at once. And that's really great for instructional tips, logistical reminders, or just supportive suggestions that you want to share out in sort of a group blast. If you send a group message, you can still see individual students' replies by hovering over the symbol icons to see which students reacted and how they reacted. You're also able to create your own custom messages. So if there's a logistical message that you find yourself typing out frequently, we recommend expanding this to open up this gear icon, and that will allow you to create or type out a custom message. So again, usually it's something that you repeat often. It might be a logistical tip or something about what they should do when they reach a SMART score, or what the SMART score goal is, for example. Whatever you want to use it for, you'll just click to add that to your custom quick messages once you finish typing it out. And then once it's added, you can then select it from your list here and easily send it out to students in large groups. So again, allowing you that bird's eye view, that connection to what your class is doing at all times. If you click on a student's questions answered part of their tile and pop up that question log, you can actually cycle through all students' questions logs by just clicking the arrows to the left and right. So you can cycle through and kind of see at a quick glance your students' current work. Again, this is designed to give you that in the moment insight on how your students are doing. And this does apply even if students aren't in the same physical space as you. So if you do have students that have to be out learning virtually, again, it's just like they're in the same physical space with you. As long as they're signed in, we can interact with them as if they're in our virtual live classroom. So again, this is underneath analytics and the lightning bolt icon furthest to the right. And I would recommend having this up pretty much anytime your students are online and you want to support and know how that work is going. All right, I'm almost at the end here. I'm just going to mention one. We did the study plans. All right, I'm going to mention a couple more points here, and then I'll open it up. We'll have some good chunk of time here at the end for Q&A. To summarize, we saw the curriculum, how the skills are computer generated. So we're generating an infinite or unlimited amount of questions, and there's no danger of repeats or students copying or calling each other to share answers. The questions are adaptive, and we saw that instant feedback component means students are getting feedback in the moment, and they're not practicing something incorrectly and reinforcing bad habits. The focus here is on scaling students up to our goal. Again, with diverse learners, we recommend starting with a much more achievable goal. At a baseline, we recommend students get to a SMART score of 70. You might want to start with 70 as your initial goal to get engaged, but you may quickly find that students will be better served by having a much lower initial SMART score goal. So you might start with maybe 60, 50, or even 40, depending on the diversity of your group. And the curriculum is integrated with those other components. The diagnostic, the recommendations, the analytics, they all work together to make the learning deeply personalized. Last thing I'll mention before Q&A is we do have some motivational components that are built in the form of leaderboards. So if you want to create a fun competition for your students, you can create a leaderboard at any time by going to the Learning tab and clicking on Awards. You'll see the option to access your leaderboard from your midbar here. And this will allow you or invite you to generate a leaderboard. You can decide who's participating, what counts for the leaderboard. So maybe only correct answers, or maybe only skills they reach proficiency and whatever, or time, whatever you want to count. You can choose the subjects and the grade content that counts. So if you're a 9th grade teacher, or let's say Algebra 1, and you only want that content to count, you can check that. Or if you want to be more diverse, you can kind of say what grade bands count. But again, this is to prevent your students from just doing a bunch of kindergarten skills to, boost their leaderboard score. So you can kind of control that. You can set the date, start and end time, and then name that leaderboard and create the board. Students will then be able to access that leaderboard from their website when they click into the awards tab, and they can see how they're progressing and climbing as they advance through the leaderboards. So again, feel free to supplement that with some sort of celebration or incentive when the leaderboard competition is done for those students that were our top achievers, if you find that to be motivating for your students. I'll also mention that we do have a complimentary mobile app. It is completely complimentary. Feel free to download it and poke around with it. That's another great thing. If you did have deeper questions about the app, that's another thing you can reach out to me to collaborate on. As we transition to our Q&A, I did want to also invite you to participate in a brief exit survey. I'm going to post the link here into the chat. Sorry, one moment. I'll post this. You can feel free to just click the link that just showed up in the chat box, or you can enter the URL into your browser. And this is really just to help us improve the quality of our training here. So again, the session was Elevate 1, and my name is Lloyd Wafer. There's my contact information again, as well as technical support. So again, if something's not working or functioning, if you're having issues with your Clever integration, for example, anything like that, make sure you do reach out to the pros on the tech support team. But any questions about pedagogy, professional development type questions, you forgot something, you're confused, send those questions my way and I will work with you directly. It's pretty natural that you're going to have more questions down the road. I know you need some time for everything to absorb, to digest all this information. I know it's a lot, but any questions that I can address here before we sign off, anything you'd like me to re-demonstrate through the live site, or any general questions we might have before we wrap up? Wonderful. Sounds like we are good for now. Again, this session was recorded. And if a question pops in your head 10 minutes from now, just shoot me that email. Again, I am available now to work with you going forward. So you have my support going forward. I'd like to thank you all for your presence, participation, engagement, and all the hard work you're doing to ensure your students' success despite the challenges you're facing. Hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. Have a great evening, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Take care. Goodbye for now, everyone.
But if the rest of the academics are blended with RSP, it's still self-contained, but